You were supposed to face a confidence vote that you certainly would have lost on Monday. You managed to get around of it this time. But I'd like to know what democratic legitimacy you still believe you have. And in the next 7 weeks, do you think you have the legitimacy to spend government money, to make announcements, and to make significant decisions? This government was recently elected with a stronger mandate. And according to the polls that I've seen, the people of Canada believe that we should be able to work to fulfill our mandate. And as we said in the speech from the throne, our priority is to move forward to the second step of our economic plan, our comprehensive economic plan with a federal budget. And the opposition parties supported that. They passed the speech from the throne. And it's more than legitimate. It's my responsibility. It's my sole responsibility now. And that is to fulfill my mandate. Obviously, very quickly, once we've brought down our budget, the opposition parties will express their opposition.
Prime Minister, I'm just wondering, a lot of people might suggest you're delaying the inevitable here. The opposition parties have already said they don't have confidence in you anymore. What happens now between now and January 26th? Are you launching into effectively an election campaign again? And is it appropriate to use public resources to do that?
Well, first of all, the government does not use public resources on an election campaign. To the extent the government uses resources on, or we use resources on campaign, we use party resources on anything that's related to a campaign, and that's you know, that's a very strict rule that we have always and will always honor. The government's work, my work, over the next few weeks will be focused almost exclusively on preparing the federal budget. As I said earlier, because we're doing it so early this year, we're not going to have time to do much else. So that's what I will be concentrating on, and I hope, as I say, the other parties will be concentrating on exactly the same thing. Because regardless of the machinations in Parliament, Canadians, you know, expect us to get on with this, and that's what we're doing. And that's the opportunity that today presents to all of us. And I think, frankly, it presents it to the opposition as much as to the government. I think there are many people in the opposition who are not necessarily comfortable with a different path. You know, I think there are many people in the opposition who would prefer, in the short term anyway, I'll give them their political due, in the short term, see the government work on the business of the economy, and would like to work with the government on the business of the economy in the short term, because that is not just in the interests of the country. In the case of the Liberal Party, particularly the New Democratic Party, that is actually in the interests of their parties, in my judgment. Now, I'm not the judge of their interests, but I think it is their mission, and I think it is in the interests of them to do that, rather than, as I say, get into you know, a side deal with the Bloc, which I think is a different game, a different agenda. The Bloc, look, and let me repeat this. As I've said before, I'll say it in English, I'm prepared to say it in French. The Bloc, every legitimate right to be here, but their game is not about working on the economy to serve the greater interests of the country. They do have a fundamentally different agenda, and that's not the agenda of the other three of us. And I think that's a very fundamental difference. I think that's a more fundamental difference than whether you're, you know, a little more for the market or a little more interventionist. I think that's a very fundamental difference. And, you know, I think that's our first responsibility. The Bloc's views have to be taken into account, are always taken into account. But I think the other three parties have very different responsibilities to the public as a whole. And you know, let me just say this. Obviously, everybody knows. I've met many times with Mr. Duceppe. I've listened many times to Mr. Duceppe and his party. We have, in fact, responded through policy to requests that Mr. Duceppe and his party have made. But as Prime Minister, I've never put myself in a position where I would be beholden to the Bloc Québécois for the governing of the country. And I don't think, if everybody sits back, that any Prime Minister or potential Prime Minister in any party would want to be in that situation. I just think that is not good for the country. I think it is very, very risky for the government in power. And so I think you know, I think that's not, you know, personally think that's not a route to go down.
Thank you very much, everybody. Merci beaucoup.
En français? En français?
Stephen Harper emerging from Government House to announce that after his meeting with the Governor General, he has been allowed to prorogue Parliament. This will happen. The parliamentary session is now over. This, according to the Prime Minister, is to buy some time, a cooling off period. The important thing for the Conservatives is they will not face a confidence vote on Monday. This is a blow, of course, to the opposition parties. The leaders are set to speak now. Gilles Duceppe, Bloc Québécois leader, right now, speaking to reporters in the foyer of the House of Commons as we listen in.
Bloc MPs, the Conservative leader denigrated the votes of all Quebecers. He has asked his supporters to engage in the worst attacks against Quebecers since Meech-Lake. He has done this simply to save his own skin. The Conservative leader has managed to do something quite extraordinary, which is to attract the criticism of all the leaders in Quebec. And even everyone in Quebec, including the civil society, has denounced Harper. The Bloc is the one who will be defending those views. It is clear that the Conservative government and its leader have lost the confidence of the House of Commons by preferring ideology to the economy. I want to remind you that the Conservative leader held an election this September at a cost of $300 million, supposedly to deal with the economy. However, now Mr. Harper is putting off for at least 6 weeks the implementation of a recovery plan. And the Prime Minister has said he wants there to be a new election, which means an additional 2 months that will be lost. In the next 6 weeks, the Conservative leader will try to assuage the people. On October 14th, the voters gave us a clear mandate. The men and women of Quebec asked us to continue to defend the values and interests of Quebec, but also to prevent the Conservatives from imposing their ideology. We are determined to carry out our mandate and to rid Quebec of Stephen Harper and its government. Well, he knew he was going to lose. Whereas in 2004, and I was standing next to him at the time, we wrote a common letter. We wrote a letter together to the Governor General, and he was standing there next to me saying, if Paul Martin loses the confidence of the House, the Governor General should ask the Leader of the Opposition to try to form a government with the confidence of the House, and he's saying quite the opposite today. He lied twice in his statement. He said, well, the next day I decided not to eliminate the subsidies, but to cap them. That's false. That's untrue. On Friday, he made a statement to the people reiterating exactly the same comments that he'd made the day before.
Why is this action immoral in your view?
Because I think that he said in 2004 that when someone's losing the confidence of the House, that person should, the Governor General should then ask the leader of the official opposition to try forming a government with the approval of the House, with the confidence of the House. Today he's saying just the opposite. He made that declaration besides me, and we wrote together a letter to the then Governor General.